Dear Diary, I want to start a blog. All the cool kids are doing it. Well, at least they were in the mid to late 90s and turn of the century. It- Today, it's important to recognize that we don't just blog for the sake of blogging. Branding is key. This is why we covered it earlier this semester, because in order to have an effective web presence, especially if you're a blogger, you have to be really finely tuned and keyed into the purpose for why you're doing it. Gone are the days when anyone wants to read your personal diary on the internet. Now we need to be in touch with our audience in a way that is very targeted and specific, in a way that makes sense and is consistent with some clarity to our purpose, and in a way that will have our audience trusting that they can come to us for the long haul for the content that they expect. And so blogs have taken on a new purpose. Online writing in general has taken on a new purpose that has differentiated from print journalism. You can see here in this example from the Arizona Republic, they have begun to do what most journalistic institutions have begun to do, which is to differentiate the purpose of their online platform as opposed to their print platform. So here you can see the new faces of homelessness on their print edition, and court overturns Phoenix $100 million City North deal, Santa's cover-up Tampa speed cameras, shirtless Obama in Hawaii causing big stir. The difference here is we start to see that because of the inherent nature of the medium being an immediate and constant one, where we have access to the internet at every moment of every day, and we're able to post at every moment of every day, and we're able to update and edit and revise at every moment of every day, it naturally caters to being a much more current breaking medium. This allows us to do breaking news, hard news, a lot more easily on online platforms, as opposed to our print platforms, which maybe now take more of a feature role, where stuff that is hard news that can wait, stuff that is not so urgent. For example, this story about the new faces of homelessness. The homeless economic crisis forces people who have never needed help to seek help. This is not something that is a new emergent crisis. This is a feature on a crisis that needs a little more attention. This is something that people can pick up today, tomorrow, next week. They can keep it in their archives and they can refer back to it, and it'll still be just as good. Because the print medium has now become way slower than any other medium we consume news on today. As blogging has become the standard for web journalism, we have to figure out how to write effectively for blogs. Essentially, we discussed in the last segment about how news organizations have turned their papers into websites, and how websites have become blogs in order to cater to a social contact between the author and the audience. So we're going to take a look now at how to write a solid blog post. Here's a little infographic for you that can help you along the way. Just like any other article we've been learning how to write, you have a title or a headline, you have a body, and you have a closing. However, what goes in each of these sections differs just a little bit. Now, headlines, what makes a good headline for a print article is not necessarily the same as what makes a good headline for a web article. For example, all of a sudden you have to start considering how someone might encounter your article on Google. Headlines should include not just terms that will grab your reader's attention, but also terms that would be searchable, that might make sense for indexing on a search engine. We have to consider search engine optimization, SEO. So you have to think about how you would rewrite a headline in order to make it search engine friendly. What would someone be Googling in order to stumble across your article? We also see a rise of spammy, clickbaity titles and headlines. And we have this argument within ourselves of whether we go with the clickbait title or the compelling content. Um, we have to re examine how we cater to our reader. Do they want to be entertained? Or will they sneer at gimmicky journalism? How will your headline affect your public perception? Just because clickbait works really well on the internet doesn't mean that it works really well for your brand's image. Now, the body, we have to, again, in the tradition of the journalistic convention of the inverted pyramid, we have to combat ADD. We have to combat the short attention spans of our readers. And so any keywords that might be important for our readers to see should go up front. However, this is now, as we saw in headlines, for two reasons. One, it is to get their attention, but two, it is to make it more searchable and more indexable on search engines. This will allow people to find our article in the first place. We also want to keep in mind word count. Ideally, you want to keep your post between 500 and 800 words. This will hopefully be long enough that it grabs your reader's attention, but goes into enough depth without losing them. The idea is you want to cut your copy in half for web compared to print. So your overall body, whereas it used to be, say, 1,200 words could be a good length for a body, you might want to cut that in half to 600 words. However, there is a bit of a discrepancy because different topics and different audiences garner different results. It's a very fluid medium, and so you start to see that there are actually a lot of different suggestions out there. If you start trying to figure out what the ideal length of a blog posts are, you're going to get very varying results. 500 to 800 words is one standard answer. Another is over 1,000 words, 1,100, 1,200 words. There seems to be a general consensus that if you keep it shorter or longer, you're going to do okay as long as you've targeted your audience properly. If you keep it in the middle, you're probably not doing one or the other well enough. You're probably too long and you're going to lose the audience that wants a shorter, snappier read, and you're probably not long enough or in depth enough for the audience that really wants a deep dive. What this means is that whatever you need to write is worth writing however much you need, as long as you are keyed into your audience. If you put in the effort, so will your audience, but it has to be something they care about. So all the more reason we need to be extra aware of our audience. We need to do our demographic research. We need to figure out what segments we're catering to and how they want to encounter it. The 5 W's and 1 H and foci become extremely important here. Here's another infographic that takes this step further. So once again, the headline, the goal is to grab attention. Getting them in the door, right? Your blog post headline is going to be the only thing that people see in a Google search result, in an email. It's going to be what gets them to click. This infographic also reminds us that the point of your article is to get people to read your article first and foremost. If you can get them to read the first 3 or 4 sentences, they're more likely to read the whole article. I suppose in some sense that goes without saying, because if they only read the first 2 sentences, they're definitely not reading sentences 3 through 12 or 15. But if you get 3 to 4, that's a tipping point in which you actually get them to read the rest a lot more often. Now, if we want to break this down into a more granular approach, sometimes we offer subheadings. And whether this is a formalized heading or not, we want to make sure that we are keeping in mind the promises that we're offering our audience. Anytime you have a headline, this functions as a promise. This is something that you're going to deliver to your audience, just like your lead, and we need to have everything supporting that lead, supporting that headline. The key here is to make sure that we are offering a benefit to our readers, something that will allow them to feel like they'll get something out of reading this. If they don't think they're going to get something out of it, generally speaking, today's sort of typically narcissistic, self-centered reader won't press on and read the rest. This is why the first chunk of your content should really aim to trigger an emotion in your reader. So we see here, we're going to probably end up using soft leads a lot more often than we would have in prior journalistic endeavors, because soft leads, anecdotal leads, can carry a lot more emotional content more easily than a hard lead, just giving the 5 W's and 1 H. We want to make sure that they feel invested and connected. What will they get out of this? How is this going to affect them? And how can they relate to it? Once they're hooked in, then they're going to read whatever you give them. We also want to break it up a little bit, so we're not giving them a wall of text. Maybe you want to use a pull quote here where someone can read a highlight without having to go through the entire article word by word. Maybe you want to insert a soundbite literally or metaphorically. Maybe this is actually a sound file that someone can play. Maybe it's just something that entices people to read further by giving them a nugget of what's to come. Again, they have another subhead here where you're giving another big promise. And this is where you're sort of following through on the promises before, taking, as it says, step by step, maybe the how-to of how they're going to get from point A to point B in your article. And ultimately, a lot of times you want to make sure that you remain practical. Give practical advice, give practical steps that people can follow, give practical calls to action. And this call to action is the meat and potatoes of your closing. This is where you get people to buy or subscribe or click or attend or whatever you're wanting them to do. This is where you try and get them to do it. Once they've bought into your article, you can try and wave the magic wand and get them to jump through whatever hoop you'd like. When we look back at our original one, you can see at the bottom of the body copy, they also include a call to action here where you summarize the post, and maybe you're linking to further information, maybe you're asking a question that you want people to reply to in the comments, which brings us to a really important part of blogging. No longer are we in the Web 1.0 static read-only shopping cart web. Now we are in the realm of 2.0 interaction, social web. This is now the realm of comments and dialogue and back and forth. And so part of our closing is actually the links that we share where we connect to other readers, other writers, the things that we want people to do in terms of commenting and sharing their own opinions, sharing on social media, prompting viewers to take your article and propagate it out to the world for you. Here's a cheat sheet for you. We haven't looked at broadcast yet, so you can keep this tucked away in the back of your mind, but as a point of comparison, you can see here. Old school print, you want about 17 to 23 words per sentence. When you get to broadcast and web, you're going to be cutting that down significantly. For web, 15 to 20 words, because people are not going to want as complicated sentence structures. It's easier to skim through and scroll through when sentences are easier. And broadcast, because you're writing for the ear, is going to be a lot shorter, 8 to 15. Overall length, For print, standard used to be 800 to 1200 words. But as we mentioned earlier, on the web, you're going to be cutting that in half. 400 to 600 for hard news, or if you're doing something more topical, more of a deep dive, the general rule is you should assume whatever someone can consume in about 7 minutes is probably your sweet spot. And this is roughly 1,000 to 1,600 words. This is a pretty wide range because obviously people read at different speeds, but they have roughly a 7-minute attention span for stuff that they want to read, assuming that they're actually interested in the topic. If you do a deep dive into horticulture and you try and sell that to a college math student, they're probably not going to invest the 7 minutes. The tone you want to take in print is usually very formal, very concise, very fact-driven. However, because of the rise of citizen journalists and web bloggers or bloggers, we want to now make sure that we take a more approachable, more colloquial, sort of casual tone a lot more often. Something that people can relate to, because this is often on a blog where you're expressing that you're a human, not just a journalism robot. However, you can also, especially if you're doing the longer form 7-minute topical approach, get very technical and very specialized. You can worry less about jargon because your audience is actually going to understand your jargon. They're part of that world. If they're going to invest the time to read a longer article, they're going to understand the terms you put into it. And the strategy for print is to convey the most important information first and to use images when necessary. With web, it's much more important to hook the audience. Even with hard news, you'll often see a lot of unconventional leads because you're hooking the audience in a way that, excuse me, is perhaps a little bit more sly than you could get away with in print because of what they've come to expect. Citizen journalism has given rise to bloggers, which has given rise to uneducated journalists who may know a lot about a topic, but not a lot about how to write about that topic. And so that means we're getting a lot of mangling of journalistic style. And we've developed a taste for this sort of new, looser, free-form style. And so we're seeing a lot less of an appetite for the inverted pyramid and for hard leads. That doesn't mean we should stop using them, but that means we have to give a little more care, especially to foci, in considering what the audience wants to hear and how they want to hear it, to try and hook the audience and write it in an interesting way. And finally, we want to take advantage of this new internet medium. We don't want to just shovel our article onto a new medium without taking into consideration what makes blogs special. Blogs are a brand new beast, a whole new territory. It allows for multiple elements: audio, video, graphics, photography, interactive links, all of this stuff in one place, where you used to have to send someone to 4 or 5 different places in order to find each one of those things. Integrating multimedia is a really good way to take advantage of this new medium of blogging. And the other thing, of course, is interactivity. For the first time, we have a journalistic medium that actually allows direct interaction in real time with the author through comments, through forum back and forths. This also can go from the author to the reader, once again, replying to comments and making sure you're in close contact with feedback. Providing links that can shoot your reader out to to other resources, giving citations by using links. Now you don't have to worry about footnotes and all of that. How do you format it, all that technical stuff, because you can just put a link in and give them the citation that way. Just send them right to the source material. In a medium that's expected to be unreliable, like the internet, citing sources is like integrity brownie points. If you're able to send people directly to where you got your information, that will just be icing on the cake for your journalistic credibility. This also goes for definitions. Another reason why we have to worry less about jargon is because you can define terms really easily. If you know the audience is going to struggle with a term, but it's a necessary term, you can link right to a definition of it. You can give background information embedded right into your article through links, link to source material. You can also set up read more breaks, meaning that if someone is going to get lost in your long content and you want them to reach the bottom a little bit quicker, you can actually put in a break where they will click only if they're interested, and it makes it look like a shorter article, tricking them into reading further and also giving them a little interactive break where they get to do something to engage with your article, increasing the chances that they're going to continue scrolling, continue engaging. It's a living medium. This is a medium where updates are allowed and expected, and you get real-time user feedback. It interfaces with all other media and can be shared via social media. And so this is something that we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of. Next, we're going to be taking a look at how this has transformed our understanding of the internet and how this has pushed us into Web 3.0 and what we should do about it.